I'd like to invite the Mayor, Mark Ashton, to say something to sort of introduce it.
First of all, I want to say what a privilege it was to be invited today. Barbara and myself, we're so pleased that you invited us down to, in a sense, commemorate Allan in this way. I did have the privilege of meeting Allan on numerous occasions, and what fitting tribute than a brush to remember him by. Allan was a person who said what it was, and you knew what it was. You couldn't be mistaken when you met Allan anywhere. He spoke to anybody, and everybody was treated with respect. Allan would be like we say about Blackpool Rock. If you cut him, it would have said Mill Road all the way through. Allan did so much for Cambridge. He was an unsung hero. And it's a pity sometimes is when people pass on that people all of a sudden say what a great person they are. Hopefully in Allan's time, enough people did say to him, Allan, what a great person you are. He was involved in so many things. And today, where we're meeting is a tribute as well. Allan was very much pressurising the council to say when we do things, they need to be done correctly. There should be space, there should be green areas, people for community. So how fitting that we're in this community building that Allan would have loved to have seen, and again, the brush outside. And again, when I go around Cambridge sometimes now, I think most of us do as well sometimes, if you see somebody pushing a car, all of a sudden, you think, you turn around and think, it's Allan with his cart and his brush. He meant so much to everybody, and like I say, I won't go on now, but I want to say what a privilege to be here, what an honour it is to remember Allan.
Thank you. Thank you. Graham was a senior colleague of Allan's, and we're very lucky to have you here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Excellent. Yes, because we set up a department called City Services when competition for all local government frontline services was put out, so that we had to bid for our work. And Allan was a key figure in this. He wasn't in management, but he was a key figure in the trade union, the GMB trade union. And so we all worked together to try and put bids in. And the first bid was for street cleaning, refuse, and I think building cleaning. It was worth, in those days, about £3 to £4 million a year. And so we collectively worked on the bid, and we came to a summit meeting where we needed to decide the scale of the bid that we put in. And we'd heard from a local authority, an area I now live in, Breckland, that the competitive...
Oh no, Allan was the talker.
And we found that the people at Breckland, that the competitors, the private companies, had put down their prices slightly. So we had to adjust ours. So we had a big meeting, all of us in the one room. It's virtually almost on this site. And here. And we got halfway through the meeting. It was going quite successfully, and I was looking for Allan. Looked around the room. I said, where's Allan? And they said, he's on the floor. And the pressure and the decision-making we were having to do, which was the future employment of quite a few people, over 100 people. Although Allan, it was my responsibility as the director, but Allan felt it so much. And that was just typical of the guy, really, how he involved himself. He could just be on a broom and not get connected with all the machinations of running a department and being in competition with others. So that's one story. My last story is later on, Margaret Thatcher and co, thankfully, went, and so did competitive tendering, because it was highly destructive, I have to say. It destroyed relationships within the local authority. In came Tony Benn, not Tony Benn, Tony Blair. Gordon, we had the Tony and Gordon show, and they thought, well, they couldn't let local government off completely, and governments always want to interfere in local government, and they drive you mad. They won't let us interfere with them. We did try, but no joy. So they came in and they thought, well, we'll get rid of competitive tendering, but we've got to have something to pin them to the wall. So they introduced best value. And so that was a kind of like an Ofsted inspection, which if you heard recently about Ofsted, it's not clever stuff, and nor was best value really. So we were inspected by people on various activities, and it culminated in a big grand inspection where we'd get a level of attainment for the whole authority. And you could be everything down to excellent or needing attention. And so we had this big inspection going on. They went through all the services, spoke mostly councillors, managers, and we got to the end of it, almost the end of it, and they said, the inspectors, this group of inspectors said, well, we'd like to go around the city. We'd like to get a real feel for it. And we decided as a corporate management team and the leading members that we wouldn't do it ourselves. I wouldn't do it. We made this decision. We said, what we want is the workforce to do it. And this was led by Allan.
Yeah.
And so Allan took this great ensemble of inspectors around the city, and when the result came back in later, we were awarded excellence. And they said the key determining factor was you had a man who was a street cleaner, and he took us around the city, and so we really believe that the culture you've got in the city is right. And we were totally impressed by that, because normally we don't get to see the people doing the real work. And so that's my memory of Allan, a great man, a great colleague, and a good friend. Thank you.
Is it me?
So, brother of Allan took us today. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm going to have to read a bit of paper because I'm not so well prepared. I'm Nigel. So I'm one of Alan's brothers. Now, just because I'm his brother doesn't mean that I'm going to be able to talk for an hour or so about the history of this site, the people that used to work here, we've heard of that already, or even about this development. Is it an appropriate development? Has it got enough green space? Allan would have had a lot to say, and I know you're talking about the past, but I do hope that people will carry on building on what he's done. Not just in local history, because we've obviously got a great local history society, but people need to keep on championing Cambridge and the quality of developments, because that's a massive challenge for the city, I'm aware. I've worked in Cambridge and we live quite nearby. Allan, I'm sure, would have been amazed and I'm sure pleased by this event and the way that he's still remembered. I do wonder if his story will become part of local history now. Interesting, won't it? So when we've all dead and gone, are people going to be standing by that broom and trying to explain what happened and part of the people that were living here and working here? It would be really nice if they were. Yeah? Hopefully it's not some robot and AI guy or something around, but it might, you never know. We've heard it before. Allan loved Cambridge and he was very enthusiastic about local history. His first interest actually was the local history of Dorking, which is the town in Surrey that the family moved to, and where Robert and Barbara live now, and where Peter, my brother Peter and I were born. And you've probably heard it recounted because he liked to tell the story quite a lot of times about how he was working at Attlee's Mill in Dorking, and he was clearing out a room or something, and there was a sacks full of stuff which were about to go in the bin, I think. And Allan looked at them, and they were all the old company records. And he got permission to keep them. I don't know what ever happened to them. Robert might know what happened to them, but he went through them and he started writing a history of that company, and he really got into local history from that. So he thought that was fascinating, and that really got him hooked on local history. I think he thought he was going to be a local history historian specialising in Dorking, because he was. But after moving to Cambridge, he did carry on giving tours in Dorking, and at Heritage Weekend, a bit like here, he had a loyal fan base there, and he put on his tours, and they would be very popular. So he's fondly remembered there, but he definitely moved his allegiance to Cambridge. So we knew that Allan knew a lot of people in Cambridge. As we've said before, every time you walk around the city, there were people where you'd have to stop and talk to people. It was a slow process. But I don't think until he died, until we heard all this, that we knew exactly the extent of the affection and the feeling about him, and that's quite amazing. So I wonder if in Alan's style I ought to do a bit of audience participation, but I'm not so good at it as him. First, who knows when Alan was born? What the year?
You wouldn't tell anybody.
Tell anyone he's actually been out there. 1951 we've heard, Brian knew it. And when did he die?
2020.
2020, it's amazing, that's nearly 3 years ago. It really is quite something to had it so long. I did speak at Alan's funeral, and I know a lot of you couldn't be there because it was a very small occasion. It was out at Barton in the height of COVID. So we had lots of restrictions, even those of us that were there, we had to keep apart, we went to tea afterwards, we had to sit in the garden, not more than 6 in a group or something like that. It was, we were obeying the laws, more or less, whereas some people weren't at the time. Anyway, I'm not going to repeat what I said at that, because I did go on quite a lot. But I did talk about what influence Allan was on me, huge influence, and how at family events I was very lucky to have 2 elder brothers, and of course one who liked to talk and lead discussions. So discussions at home were always interesting. I also talked at that event about how wonderful Janice actually and Arthur Rank were, because Allan suffered a lot in his last years. Whenever we used to go to visit him, we'd have to time it around medication so that he wasn't in too much pain, but Janice had to put up with it all. So at that occasion, my children, they also spoke, as did Janice's nieces who are here. And I think there's a common theme about that. We've heard it before. He's really good at listening. He kept on probing them about what was interesting them. He couldn't give no. He couldn't give a short answer. He would encourage them, and he kept supporting them as well. So we've heard today, we've got some of the family here. We've got Janice, of course. We've got my brother Robert, Alan's 2 nephews. We've got Janice's nieces, Janice's sister, Janice's niece's children. No grandchildren yet? Here, no grandchildren? We've got a lot. There's lots and lots of them. And I want to say, on behalf of everyone, of course we've got friends, and Brian's one of them is going to talk, but I want to say on behalf of everyone and all of us, the family and friends, a big thank you for the bench and the broom and this event. It's amazing, really. We think the broom is a really clever idea and very well done. And we're really honoured that Allan is remembered so fondly, and this little part of Cambridge is associated with him.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name's Brian Salter. I met Allan at Sheffield University, which is a fair while ago, and really we were friends ever since. We did various trips together, hitchhiking, mountaineering things, and kept in contact for a long time until cancer really came to dominate the situation, which was obviously half for him and Janice, but half for me as well, to be honest. I have to say that as far as I'm concerned, Allan was my lifelong best friend, although I know that there's a lot of other people who would have the same claim, especially Janice. I'd like to thank the Millground History Society for hosting this event, which is an opportunity for me to say goodbye that was denied because of COVID, which wasn't good. And I also like to thank Allan for his insight and his friendship over the years. I really miss him. Yeah. Goodbye, Allan. Thank you.
Veronica would like to say something, and Kay would like to say something, and Ali from the Museum of Cambridge would like to say something.
Hi there, I'm Veronica Spears, and well, don't know where to start. I've known Allan firstly through the Labour Party, and he was a good friend of my mum and dad, Ronald and Christine Spears, who were passionate old Labour. And so they used to have a lot of old Labour discussions with Allan. And I used to meet him in the streets and he'd say, your mum spoke so passionately the other day. Or I'd meet my dad and he'd say, Allan was standing up for the cause again this time. You know, they were all there holding on to those really solid values of true Labour principles, socialist principles, that I hope we regain again in this country. The other thing that I'm passionate about with him, and I know him well for, is that he encouraged me to become a Cambridge tour guide. And he told me, I met him in Romsey Rec, and he said, you know, Veronica, if you do that, it's like taking a degree. I said, what? He said, yes, it's like taking an Open University degree. I said, oh, okay. And it was, actually. It was the most amazing experience. I did a whole year of study. I did 2 written exams, 2 practical exams, and had to go out in the streets after all that. But Allan was always a mentor. And Sophie Smiley, who spoke when we opened the wonderful bench on Mill Road Bridge, which is also brilliantly placed. I love looking at that bench, and I think of him every time I go by. She said that he believed passionately in the town, not the gown. And that's me too. I grew up in Cambridge since I was 2, so I'm interested in the university, but I'm passionate about the town. And that's how it was with Allan. So I'm just going to tell you a funny sort of way that he would bring history alive for people. And I did it yesterday in a tour group outside St Benet's Church, where there were actually plague pits. And we think COVID was bad. Well, the bubonic plague was pretty vile. So, okay, you lot, this is what you would do. You lot here, I'm really sorry, you're all dead. You died of plague, but you lot, you've survived. So thank you, Allan. You've been an amazing friend and mentor, and I miss you, and I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you. I'm Kay Blaney, and I had the great privilege of knowing Allan because of Mill Road connections and living up Mill Road and other kind of born and bredder. I was really passionate about town, as Veronica was, and the gown. I always wanted to step over the threshold. And actually my father really did encourage me to do that. And Allan, and I did, and became a member of Emmanuel College. So instead of being on the bus, you know, from Romsey Town, getting the bus from what was the bowling alley or whatever it was at that point, I then was over the other side and could see the swimming pool. And Allan was a great, really encouraged that. Education, obviously, was the big thing that we talked about a lot. And I'd like to just say for some of you that knew that, he used to go in all of the primary schools in this area and just dump rubbish, and he did recycling before recycling, was really on the agenda. For me, in the drama class, I always used to do a lesson on status, and I used to bring in Allan for that because I just wanted people to know that there was more to this, between 1 and 10, everybody had to wear post-it notes on their head, and they often used to put a 0 or a 1 for Allan, how wrong they were after he spoke to them. And it was a really good thing, and Allan and I loved speaking about status. On the 10th of February 2020, I'd been trying to arrange it for a long time. Allan agreed for me to do his life history. Luckily, because I'd done life histories as my methodology when I was doing my masters, I knew the ethics and everything behind that. I knew that actually it was Allan's story. Allan actually sent me an email, the last email, to say that I could use his story. But actually it is his story, but it was Janice's story and his family's story. I haven't dared do too much with it yet because I respect it so much. But one thing I will say to you is definitely sit on the bench, definitely go by the broom, but the eagle really came up in that story. Just raise your glass in the eagle, because him and Janice used to work there and that's where they met. I've written one monologue out of this life story so far, dedicated to Allan, and it will be on the Capture in Cambridge. But watch this space. I'd like to do more with Janice's and the family's blessing. But Allan, and some of you are probably in it, your names are all mentioned, so certainly a couple of people that have talked today, you were definitely mentioned in the life history. So, thank you, Allan, on behalf of everybody. You've given us all something. Yeah, thank you.
It is quite funny. So, in 2019, I got knocked over by some dogs and I broke my foot. In September that year, I was supposed to be the steward for Allan's Mill Road tour. And I actually had never actually made one of it, and I got to one of his tours, so I really was looking forward to it. But I was wearing a surgical boot, and we started off at Burnside, and the furthest I'd got in this boot was down to the co-op, so we've got to go all the way to the bridge. So it was a bit trepidatious, but anyway, we set off. Within 2 minutes, he was there. And I was sort of going along like this. There were 2 people who were quite elderly on this tour, and they got sticks. And I thought, how are they managing to do it? So anyway, then I saw him get into a bit of a crowd of people. I was wearing my fluorescent jacket, and this dog came along and got in the muddle, and there was a pushchair and everything. I thought I should be stopping this, I should be making sure the group can get through, but I just soldiered on. Finally he stopped. Thank goodness Allan had so much to say about the I managed to catch up, and I actually heard some of the tour. How I know about the bit down by Memorial Road and everything. And I just got there and I was listening to what he said, and then he says, and Mary will tell you all about Brookfields. And I went, so I did my best off the cuff, because he hadn't asked me beforehand. And off they went again. And then they got into more problems with all the people, and I thought, it just goes so fast. But he got there and he got them all the way down the road, and I managed to get to the bottom of the bridge, just as he said. And, well, that's lovely, everybody, thank you for coming. I never got to do one of Allan's that I am very sad, but I'm sure some people might come and talk to me about what the rest of the things he said.
Hello everyone. I haven't prepared anything, but Lucy asked me to speak, so I'm going to speak from the heart. I first met Allan in 2018 with my first job at the Museum of Cambridge, and I came along as this very kind of inexperienced and enthusiastic museum officer, and the museum was having a really difficult time, and my job was to work with the trustees to try and make things a bit better. And 2 things I remember from that time. Allan was one of the trustees, and it was very clear to me, after only a few kind of hours of meeting him and the rest of the trustees, was the enormous respect and affection that people had for Allan. It was just so clear as someone coming in that this was someone who was really important, and that he was the kind of linchpin of local history, and it was wonderful to work with him. But the second thing I remember, and the thing that kind of really touches me, is just how much of a champion he was for me, because I was, didn't really know what I was doing, still kind of don't know what I'm doing, but he just championed me and cheerleaded and made me feel so warm, and I'm sure that's no surprise to anyone, but that's the thing that really struck me. And so you've all talked about the ways you remember Allan, and the brush, and the broom, and the bench, and the eagle. And my memory is the function room in the Museum of Cambridge at trustee meetings. And sometimes when I'm sitting there, I sort of think to myself, well, what would Allan do about the museum in this situation? So that's my memory and how I think of him.
And I wanted to say that Allan mentored me a bit and persuaded me to do more volunteering, particularly in our schools. So as he became unwell, that I could start taking the baton, not so much kind of publicly, but in volunteering in the schools. And you will see over the next few months some of the fruition of that I've been trying to work with about 300 primary school children every year over the last few years. So that's quite a big reach. And between us, we have made 270 handmade blue plaques to go in another set of streets. So we've kind of really taken it on board to tell the story of regular working people, skilled artisans, working people who lived in this neighbourhood. And I thank Alan for all his encouragement, because he would say to me, well, you work for the BBC and I know you're off in China next or now Ukraine or whatever, but when you come home you can still make a difference, and that storytelling is what he really imprinted on me, to make sure that we allow children to have the time to appreciate their own history of their environment, whether they've lived in Cambridge for 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, or somebody who'd lived here 20 years, just to take Cambridge to their heart and share that passion for local history. So I owe him a huge debt, and I'm hoping to kind of keep up while I can the kind of 300 children a year I promised him I'd try and reach.
Fantastic. Thank you, Helen.
Alan was always ringing me up, as his colleagues said there, and saying, Dave, could we do it this way? Could we improve it? Was Alan that pushed for improvements in everything that we did? He was in part responsible for the Romsey art, for the boxes outside the co-op. I just got one small anecdote. We were talking about what shall we call the area that became called Timberworks, and he suggested Little Russia.
Society. And in the summer of 2021, we were approached by Claire Phillips on behalf of the Cambridge Investment Partnership to discuss having a commemorative item on this site for Alan. And someone, and I wish I could remember who, had once said to me that the idea of a broom was central to the way that we all remembered Alan. So we put that idea to Claire. I think she was a little surprised, but she did agree. And also, to our great pleasure, she agreed that we could approach Mackay's, our lovely local firm in East Road, to design and manufacture the broom. We were really delighted about that, because it was very important to us to have something local involved, and it would have mattered hugely to Alan as well. You would have been amused, therefore, one time in late summer, to watch Janice and me bicycling down to Mackay's with Alan's original broom. I had the top bit in my bicycle basket, and Janice somehow managed the handle without falling off. And dealing with Mackay's has always been friendly and efficient throughout. There are two people in particular who can't be here today, Scott Bailey and Tass Clayton. Scott, I think, did most of the manufacture, and Tass some of the design. And before you give, I hope, a round of applause to them, I'm going to pass you over to Andrew Mackay to talk a little bit about the involvement of the shop.
No problem. Thank you very much, Cara. And thank you very much for inviting us to be involved in the project. It's been an absolute honour. I didn't know Alan personally, although he was at school with my uncle and my dad, which I found out today. And it's been fascinating to understand a little bit more about him and why they wanted this to be made. I mean, our original thought when you approached us about it was, you said there's a new building being made. We want to do this commemoration and this broom, and we want it to be made out of metal, and we want it to be outside. And our initial thought was, scrap value is quite high. How long will that last? so not only in the design did we want to make it representative of his actual broom, which is why we asked for it to be brought in. I'm sorry, I didn't realise you had to come on your bike. But we also wanted to make sure that it was actually properly secured. So it's made out of copper. So it's already weathered quite nicely, as we expect. But to keep the cost down and also make it a bit more solid, it's got a stainless steel core. And then it's obviously bolted through into the floor and into the wall. I'll have to correct you in terms of Taz and Scott. Scott you had the most contact with, but the real skilled artisan, metal artisan really, you'd call him, is Tass Clayton. And it's quite fitting really, he is someone with a lot of skills and a lot of passion for metalworking. He's a local lad, grown up and then lived just off of East Road his whole life, and went to school around here. And Cambridge has changed, this whole area has changed. We've seen a lot of change as a business around here, and this whole area and Mackay's and all around used to be the industrial part of the city, used to be where things were done, where things were made, and things have changed, but we've always tried to maintain a level of that, and Taz is representative of that, and he's developed in himself really a lot of good skills. I wish I could improve his sickness record, but that's another matter. So on behalf of them, I'm just here really for them today. We want to say it's been an absolute privilege to do this for Allan, and we hope that it is a fitting tribute. Thank you.